and very importantly, a cooling track this afternoon. Well, this Castrol 6 Hour for 1980 is shaping up as a tremendous battle, mainly because of the two largest bikes in the field, the GSX 1100 Suzuki and the CB 1100R Honda. But of course, the 750 division for this year as well is heading for a great battle. We've got some of the fastest teams together on some of the fastest bikes, and that, added to the improved Amaroo Park circuit here this afternoon, has led to some extraordinary times in qualifying, so much so that the lap record has been smashed repeatedly. Well, with me this afternoon are the two men who are going to take you right round the 6 hours of Castrol tomorrow afternoon, and by the way, the two men who will be with us for the Swan Series on ABC Sport later this year, Will Hagan and John Smales. Well, first off, is it really going to be a battle between the big bikes, or is it a battle for every rider out there tomorrow?
Well, obviously the riders go for personal glory. It's one of these funny races, like the Hardy-Frodo, where the riders don't necessarily regard it in a riding sense as their greatest achievement to win it, but in a career sense, it is the most important event they can possibly win. So to them, it is vitally important, and even more than that, it's vital to the manufacturers for motorcycle sales.
Thanks, Will. And John, it really is a quick field, but how close is the competition for this year's Castrol?
Well, there's only 1.6 seconds now separating the top 10 bikes in the field, and only 2 seconds separating the top 14. Now, that's extraordinary. It's the closest that the Castrol 6-hour field has ever been. There's incredible competition, not only amongst the bikes, but also amongst the component manufacturers. Pirelli, for example, has spent a lot of money developing tyres for this year's event, and strangely enough, they've not been totally successful. The Honda teams have mostly decided to go for Metzeler tyres on the rear to try and compensate for a slight instability problem that they've been feeling in practice. So it'll be a very interesting race in terms of componentry as well as riders.
Thank you, John Smales. Well, we'll be hearing a lot more about that very controversial note tomorrow once the start gets underway. Well, now we're going to have a look at the top 10 fastest qualifiers for tomorrow's Castrol 6 Hour, and we're starting off with the 10th fastest, the man who began it all 11 years ago, Lin Utley, who won the first Castrol 6 Hour back on a Triumph 650 11 years ago. He's heading for his 11th race. It could be the race that he finishes his career on. His co-rider on the Yamaha, is Steven Gul, and a very interesting story behind Steven Gul is the fact that he had never ridden a production bike coming into the Castrol last year. After 12 months layoff, he's come back and decided to do it again. So let's have a look at Lin Utley having a look on his qualifying lap this afternoon.
Right, it's Steven Gul who in fact did the fastest qualifying lap this afternoon, a 57.79. Steven, that's quite incredible when you consider you haven't been on a production bike for more than a year.
Yes, well, my sponsors, McCulloch Yamaha, invited me to come along when Murray hurt himself. Murray fell off during the week practicing. So I came along, had a bit of a ride, and it's all gone very well. The bike's in tremendous form, good old reliable 1100 Yamaha.
But at the same stage, this old reliable 1100 Yamaha has been down the road, what, once or twice in the last few days?
Twice this week, yeah.
Is that of concern to you in terms of its reliability for tomorrow?
No, the mechanics have done an excellent job fixing the bike, and, you know, like I said, it's a good old reliable bike, and it'll be there at the finish, we hope.
Lin Utley, we were surprised to see the Yamaha up amongst the new Hondas and Suzukis in the top 10. You, of course, won the inaugural Castrol 6 Hour, what, 11 years ago, but you've been kicking on. You came third last year, and you've won another one back in the dim dark past. Had you expected this bike to be up as far as it was?
After yesterday's practicing, when Steven was doing consistent 58s and a few 57s, we thought that, you know, we had half a chance. We felt that we'd just go out and do our best, and if it got in the top 10, well, it got in the top 10. I think we started off at 7th and we slowly slid down to 10th. But
what are the race tactics then for tomorrow for this bike? I don't think it can really, you can't expect it to stay with the top Hondas and Suzukis.
Oh no, and we're not expected to. Our sponsors don't expect us to do that. They asked us just to ride the bike around. What we need to do is get 2 hours out of our tank petrol, which I think we will do, and no tyre change. If that happens and we can circulate around about 58 seconds, I think they'll be looking over their shoulder and seeing us at the end.
Right, let's have a look now at Lin Utley and Steven Gul on the Yamaha XS 1100.
Number 9, another of the CB 1100 Hondas, this one being ridden by a somewhat unknown quantity of two South Africans, David Woolley and Rod Gray. Coming down the hill now, and another of the Gus Liu entries that was sealed out of the crate, and these two boys have done a great job. First time at Amaroo Park on the first outing for this bike, which has enormous ground clearance. As you'll see, you'll never see the foot pegs scraping on those bikes. They can be taken over to 50 degrees before anything touches. and that gives them something of an advantage over the Suzukis, which have been scraping timing covers and even throwing the riders off on some corners. Round onto pit straight now. And a 58.75, a very creditable time indeed.
Well, with me now, the two international competitors who have come out to Australia especially for this Castrol 6 Hour, David Woolley and Rod Gray. Well, Rod, first off, how have you found the Honda? You mustn't have had too much of experience on it.
No, it's going very well actually. We've been out for 4 days and we're starting to get down to some good times.
What, were you impressed with the Murs circuit?
We've got a lot of hard work out there, no time for rest.
This, you've got, what, 6 South African titles between the two of you. It's a very experienced team that you're putting up. How do you think you'll fare against the Australians?
I feel we should go very well. We can only get out and try our hardest.
David, have you ever come across any of these competitors before?
No, not at this circuit. Or not anywhere, actually, other than Rodney. He's the only one.
And what do you think of some of the exponents that you've seen on the track so far?
Very quick, very quick.
Do you feel that the Honda is the bike for this race?
Oh, difficult to say. You know, being a Honda dealer in South Africa myself, it's hard for me to say that, but it's definitely will be up there.
So you're largely out here to reinforce Honda's standing as a dealer?
Yes.
Not because you think it's probably the best racing bike?
Well, yes, as well.
Okay, well, the best of luck to those international competitors. And the 7th or fastest qualifier, also an international competitor, Ron Haslam, team with Ken Blake.
The fast sweeping part of the Amaru Park circuit sees Rocket Ron Haslam, the 24-year-old import from England, making his race debut at the Castrol 6 Hour. And what an impression he's made too. Lined up with triple winner of the race, Ken Blake, on bike number 2, one of the new CB1100 Hondas. They qualified 8th fastest, and Haslam's put in well over 200 laps of practice. And one thing he doesn't know is how to back off. He slides the bike, he works it hard, and with very even times between the two of them, could be a real threat if the front runners burn themselves out early on. Formula One world champion last year, deposed from that by Graham Crosby, the New Zealander, this year, but a great rider.
Former world Formula One champion, Rocket Ron Haslam. How did it feel at Amaru Park doing a lap like that?
Well, it's really hard, and it's going to take me quite a bit to get used to it, but I think as they start the race, I should be able to get quicker.
Ron, you came out here less than a week ago. You'd never ridden the CB1100, the big Honda. You'd never raced on production motorcycle tyres, and you'd never seen Amaru Park, yet within 25 laps you were lapping on the pace. That's an extraordinary effort.
Yeah, well, I like the bikes once I got it, and the circuit, it's same as back home. Well, nearly the same as back home. It's a short circuit. Only thing I've got to get, right is the off-cambers and the production bike.
You've become the talk of the pits. There are a lot of people who say they've never seen a harder man on a motorcycle around here, that you're really chucking the bike about. Now, that's not good for a long-distance race.
Well, I don't know. I think I'll just pace myself out a bit, and I think I should be okay.
Meaning that you'll go slower, or what?
No, I don't think so. I think as the race goes on, I should get a little bit quicker.
Ken Blake, the co-rider of the bike and 3 times Castrol 6 Hour winner, how do you feel about taking over a machine from a man who's as hard on it as is Ron Haslam?
Well, he looks, he does have a flair. He looks like he goes fast, kind of, but with his performances in the past, he's a finisher, so I think we'll be there for sure.
And yet there's only 1.6 seconds separating the top 10 bikes on the grid. Therefore, you can't afford to ride for consistency, can you?
Well, I've been here, many years, and I've never seen it as competitive as this. And I think we'll just have to run with the pack and see what happens. Tyre wear will obviously come into it, but there are so many going quickly. I think we'll just have to hang in there and see what happens.
GSX 1100.
GSX 1100 Suzuki. When the entries opened. But they didn't know at that time just how good the new and yet to be seen Hondas would be. And of course we know now that they are very fast indeed. But this bike has won all the long-distance production races in Australia this year, and the man on it at the moment, Neil Shivers, so friendly and affable, was the man that shared the winning ride in last year's Castrol 6R with Alan Hales. On this occasion, he'll be sharing it with John Pace, a Grand Prix racing star who's been in England this year, going tremendously well. And a very happy team, the two riders blending together well, doing a 57.36 Neil Shivers, which is a very good time.
John Pace and Neil Shivers on another of the big Suzukis. John, you've been looking after this bike with tender loving care all week. It really hasn't done too much out on that circuit, has it?
No, not at all. You know, it's a long race tomorrow, and we're just trying to conserve as much as we possibly can. You know, tyres is another thing, but the bike's the thing that we've got to get over the line.
Do you feel it's an advantage going out there with a bike that's still a little bit tight?
Yeah, because it's only going to get faster.
How'd you find the circuit? You've done quite a bit here at Amaru. You've ridden in 3 6-hours, and you've had success over in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And you went well at Europe. Are you pleased with the way you've been riding?
Yeah, well, it's as long as I'm learning all the time, it's the main thing. You know, my results have been pretty varied this year, but you know, coming back home has made a hell of a difference because I can just fall back into the old pattern where I left off, and I'm happy again.
And that's only bike racing when you talk about old patterns, I hope, John.
Yeah, well, this is it. Yeah.
And your co-rider, Neil Shivers, a man who's had a tremendous amount of success in the Castrol, winning it last year with Alan Hales. Neil, how do you found the new Suzuki?
Oh, the Suzukis are going well. We're not up the list as far as we'd like to be, but we'll win it from position 7 with a bit of luck.
You told me earlier today that you'd hope to be in position 3.
Yeah, well, number 3's group position number 3's won it more times than any other group position on the line there, going on the statistics over the last few years.
Well, a very exuberant pair, Neil Shivers and John Pace, and hopefully they'll be there right at the end for the Suzuki team. Well, next to them on the grid are two of the men, a very fast pair, Mick Cole and Alan Decker, on another of the big Hondas.
Michael Cole and Alan Decker, one of the less spectacular teams among the endurance riders, but one that's had an enormous amount of success. This is Alan Decker, and their most notable success in the hands of Cole was to win the Arai 3R at Bathurst this year and the Suzuka 8R in Japan, a tremendous performance, very evenly matched in terms of time, very good if it rains. Cole's very safe and very good in the rain. And although I don't expect them to be battling with the really hard chargers, the Dennis Neils and Alan Hales early in the race, they will probably be well placed in the middle of the first 10, somewhere around that area, and certainly be ready to pounce if problems befall the early riders. A 57.45 gives an indication of the sort of time that they'll probably try to run the race, and that's what they're doing now rather than going for a spectacular one-off for pole position.
This time last year, Victorian Michael Cole was on crutches following an accident before the 1979 Castrol 6R. Since then, he's gone on to win the Suzuka 8R in Japan. This year, he's won the Coca-Cola 800 and the Arai 500. All of them superbike races. Mick, how does this production machine feel compared to the RSC superbike that you ride?
Well, the production bike is based, the factory has based their production bike on our superbike, actually. So they've built a bike that's in the range of the average person who wants a bike for the road, and based it on our high-performance motorcycle.
But it has road-going tyres on it.
Yes, it has road-going tyres, slightly softer suspension, so that it wouldn't, you know, so it's nice and rideable on the road. A slightly milder engine, but nonetheless very similar.
Do you feel comfortable on the bike?
Yeah, very comfortable. Well, these have only been in the country about 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So we're still sorting it, really. We're still learning, but it's still competitive.
Is it competitive enough to win the Castrol 6R tomorrow, considering that it has very little development on it?
Oh, my word. I think, I'm not giving you a spiel, but I think you will find that one of these will be winning.
Alan, comfort for the rider is particularly important in a long-distance event. Just what does this bike offer you in terms of comfort? I noticed that, for example, you can't put a pillion passenger on it.
Well, for me, you've got this back support piece under hard acceleration. You're in a crouch position. There's no need to sort of hold yourself down into the bike. You sort of fall into a natural race position. Handlebars are low. They're sort of well positioned, all in line with the movements of your hands.
It's a real sports tourer.
Yeah. It's a very comfortable riding and racing bike.
Another Honda that's on the grid in 5th position is a bike that no one had expected to see there. Robert Reid from Queensland riding in his very first Castrol 6 Hour on his Honda CB1100.
Robert Reid and Peter Byers, sharing bike number 36, have emphasised the competitiveness of this new CB1100 Honda, because they're both Queenslanders. To my knowledge, the first time for both of them at Amaroo Park, and there you saw one of them going just a fraction too soon to Honda corner, and he had to tuck out and go again just to keep his head literally off the wall. But they have done a tremendous job in slotting this bike up into the top 10 qualifiers today. Coming around there through the 3rd gear corner onto the straight, juggling power with adhesion, and looking back just to see who's following at a 58.08, a very good time indeed, and last year would have in fact qualified 4th fastest. Give you an idea of how much the times have quickened up this year, because Dennis Neal, the fastest qualifier today, 1.6 seconds faster than he was 1 year ago.
Well, Robert Reid, as incredible as it may sound, you've never been here for the 6 Hour before, and yet you're in the top group of qualifiers. How'd you manage to do it?
Well, actually, it was Peter that got the fast qualifying time, and he's had more time on the bike, so he seemed to be going faster during the week, so we elected to put him on the first run, and as it turned out, the tyres were newer, and he seemed to be able to come to grips with it better than what I have.
Have you had a pairing before in a production race?
No, this is our first run.
Well, it's a fairly outstanding performance. Peter, what's your background?
Oh, it's up to date now. I've only run the Pirelli 3 Hour, which I shared with Queensland rider Jeffrey French. We come 3rd in that. And prior to that, I've just been privateer. There's only the 750 Honda I rode in the 3 Hour, and this one here is the only one. It's the only bikes I've had.
Have you undergone any special preparation and build up for this 6 Hour?
Oh, just maintain body stamina so you can just keep on going. It's the main thing. We're nothing, like we're riding all the time, and just to keep a general body fitness up. So
well, that's a team that we'll be looking at very carefully tomorrow to see whether they can maintain that consistency out of the blue. First time at Amaroo Park, finishing up in the top group of qualifiers. Well, the next man that we're going to see on the circuit is no new name to any motorsport follower, because Alan Hales won last year's Castrol 6 Hour, and his teammate is David Hiscock from New Zealand.
This man, New Zealander David Hiscock, has not been beaten in the last 6 long-distance production races since last year's Castrol 6 Hour. A phenomenal performance. He's won 4 races in Australia, actually was disqualified from the Surfers Paradise race, which was the first to finish, and 2 in New Zealand. Absolutely blistering form, 57.9 seconds his best time in that particular lap. He's sharing the ride with last year's winner, Alan Hales, and the team absolutely bristles with confidence, almost unbelievable confidence from this pair and their GSX 1100 Suzuki. Hasn't been without its problems. They've broken a crankshaft and had to replace another, and Alan Hales fell off in testing about a week ago when he dug in just back there at Honda Corner. But the team on form, very much one to beat, although only 3rd qualifier, which was where Alan was last year, but I think further off the pace than Alan Hales would want to be. 0.6 of a second slower than Dennis Neal.
The red-hot favourite for this year's event, Alan Hales on the Suzuki, but already under a cloud. In practice, your bike's broken a crankshaft. What's happened?
Well, we got our bikes very late in the week, leading up to practice, and we weren't able to do our usual preparation. We had to seal them straight out of the crates in order to get them scrutineered in time, and it was just a service problem. It's normally done when the bike's new, but we were just so pushed for time we didn't have time to check it, and of course, you know the story.
But what happens to you in terms of your fears for 6 hours of hard racing if you've broken one crank?
Well, there's no real problems because the crank has been checked now. The new one's been put in. The motor's been completely stripped right down to the gears, and it's been built by the Suzuki serviceman, and we won't have any problems.
Dave, you're 4th on the grid. I'm sorry, Alan, you're 4th on the grid. Is that far enough up for you for a clean start tomorrow in such a competitive field?
Yeah, we're very happy with our position. We didn't really go out to set a very fast time. We've got tyres that last well but don't grip as good as some of the other tyres for a short distance, so we're very pleased with our time. We'll be there at the end.
The quietest man in motorcycle racing in Australia is New Zealander Dave Hiscock, but Dave has a remarkable record, having won all 4 of the long-distance production bike races in Australia this year. Dave, the Castrol 6 Hour has eluded you so far. How do you feel?
I'm feeling very confident with the bike. Like, I'm sure we'll have no problems with the bike. It's proved itself all year in all the other long distance races. They've won everywhere. So I've got a lot of confidence in the bike itself. Right.
Well, let's hope that your confidence is well rewarded tomorrow. In third position on the grid, on yet another Honda CB 1100R, is Wayne Gardner, the young Wollongong rider, riding with Australian champion Alan Johnson.
A really interesting team, this one. Bike number 5, entered by Mentor Motorcycles, prepared by ace car and motorcycle tuner Peter Malloy, and ridden by 2 very quick young riders, Andrew Johnson, the Australian Unlimited champion this year, and Wayne Gardner, a man doing a tremendous job on superbikes and absolutely mercurial in the wet. CB 1100 Honda, which Malloy has had a very close look at since he took delivery of it. And these 2 riders qualifying so far third fastest, a 56.66 in earlier timed runs. And I expect them to run right up front during the early part of the race tomorrow, because neither of them know how to go slowly. They like to run at the front.
Well, on the bike for that record of 56.6, the time around the circuit was only half a second, yes, off the fastest qualifying time, Wayne. That was a great ride. What's your preparation been for the 6 hour?
Well, there's been a whole week of it, really. Just go as hard as we can and try and find which is the best tyres, and we're getting there finally.
What have you decided to run on?
Metro on the back and Pirelli in the front.
And do you feel that the half second between you and the leading contender is a big enough gap for them to win, or is it not enough for you to get back into the race?
No, it's not a big enough gap. Really, 6 hours is a long time, so I think we'll be right there at the end, I hope.
Well, you're both regarded as sort of superbike riders, aren't you? Because you're both leading your own respective states in the superbike race. How are you handling this production bike in comparison?
It's very nice to ride compared to my superbike. My superbike's a lot quicker, but it's very nice for a production bike and handles quite well.
Well, Andrew, you've had tremendous success already this year, winning the Grand Prix in Perth and also leading Victoria in the superbike race for points this year. Are you handling this all right?
Yes, the bike's prepared excellently. The setup of our tyres is okay. Got an excellent co-rider, good team, manager, good mechanic. The whole outfit's looking very good.
Well, perhaps you're probably the 2 fastest riders together in terms of out-and-out pace. A lot of the other teams, for example, have a fast rider and a conservative rider. Are you going to go for broke the whole time?
No, we're going to keep on the pace. We'll just keep on the same pace we can maintain. But we are the 2 fastest riders, which does help.
Well, we can look forward to those 2 riders giving us a tremendous amount of excitement tomorrow, because they will never ever be far off the lead, and they'll be setting a cracker pace throughout the 6 hours of the Castrol. In second place on the grid in another GSX 1100, Rod Cox and Malcolm Campbell.
The team of Rod Cox and Malcolm Campbell on this GSX 1100 Suzuki, not to be underrated, because they're being looked after by former road race and speedway star Bob Levy. GSX 1100 Suzuki is very much a known quantity, and the 2 riders are very quick indeed. Not as well known as the Alan Hales and Dennis Neals, but quick nevertheless. Campbell, the one riding at the moment, is about 0.3 of a second faster than Cox, but they were second fastest qualifier earlier today, and their most notable achievement was the Coca-Cola 800 at Oran Park earlier this year on the production bike. They were second, and that was actually a Honda 900, but they were second, beating a field of superbikes and prototypes and the first production bike home. And they will be very consistent and probably stay out of any trouble earlier in the race.
Comparative youngsters on the grid, Malcolm Campbell and Rod Cox, have been discovered by one of the veterans of Australian motorcycle racing, who's put them on the Suzuki GSX 1100. Malcolm, the bike itself is a superb motorcycle, certainly, but can it do the race distance with the sort of competition you've got?
Oh, it definitely does. The distance okay. The bike's going superbly. I think it's going to be a bit of a tactical race. We could go into it and sprint, but you can get mixed up in a lot of dices and could get involved in accidents and that sort of thing. So, you know.
Bob Levy, your team manager, the man whose name I was struggling to remember before, in fact wouldn't let that happen because he knows that over 6 hours you can't afford to sprint in the opening stages, yes?
Oh, it's a long way. You can't afford to sprint, but then again you can't afford to let them disappear neither.
Right. Rod Cox has earned himself the reputation of Rod Stack in the last week or so. He's put this model down the road twice. Can you avoid doing it a third time?
Oh, I hope so. I just want to have a close look at the corner of Asheville.
Pole position on the Castrol 6-hour grid for 1980 goes to Dennis Neal and Roger Hayes on the Honda CB 1100R.
Dennis Neal sharing bike number 4 with Roger Hayes, a former winner of the race. Dennis Neal last year in the loop tangled with Ron Bolden, caused enormous controversy, was running second right to the end when he came off and riding under protest on the last corner of about the second last lap. But he was the fastest qualifier last year, has been right up among the fastest times this year, and has been longing all year to have the power and the competitiveness of the big 1100 Honda under him, because often he's been battling with less power than the GSX 1100 Suzukis have had. A 57.58 on his last flying lap as we watch. But Neal is going to be a hard man to toss, and in the early race tactics and manoeuvring will be the man from the Honda teams to put the pressure on Alan Hales on the Suzuki and hopefully to unsettle their race plan.
Well, the man that everybody's looking forward to provide a little bit of excitement tomorrow. You set the pole position, Dennis, and yet you tell me you reckon you're going out a bit faster tomorrow. Is that right?
Yeah, we're still foxing a little bit. Our team and a few other teams actually got us in the 55s today, but they timed from different spots up there in the control tower, so hope to run a few 55s tomorrow in the start and try and make an early break.
That'd only be for the first few laps?
Well, we'll see how easy I'm doing it, depending on the day, but I'll try and run very good times for first half hour anyway and demoralise them.
So your race strategy really is to go for break right from the beginning?
Yep, it's the only way I race. I ride flat out the whole time, and I figure that's the best way because you can keep your concentration up.
Well, Roger, how are you going to handle that after going out behind a trailblazer like Dennis here? Will you be driving or riding conservatively or still cracking on?
I'll be going as fast as I can go, but the problem is getting on the bike after Dennis has been on it. What he does to tyres is incredible.
Well, they're the favourites for the event in terms of the Honda dealers and in terms of the crowd probably too, because they're going the fastest. We'll have a final note now on the Castrol 6-hour from Will Hagan on the point of scrutineering.
Well, Peter Van Murs, you've been brought in to help Chris Peckham this year, and you've seen both the brand new Honda 1100 and also the GSX Suzuki. How do you see them comparing as two machines?
Oh, well, they've both got their good points. I think we'd find the Honda to be a little quicker at the end of the straights, but the Suzuki has different engine characteristics which will probably allow it a tiny bit more power out of corners.
What about fuel consumption? Is there much difference, for instance, in carburation?
In carburation, there's a lot of difference. Different brands of carburetors, of course, but jet layouts and sizes vary a lot. I would expect the Suzukis to give slightly better fuel economy, but on the other hand, the Hondas have a slightly larger fuel tank to compensate.
How sophisticated are they in the engines?
Oh, very, very. Engines in modern-day motorcycles are setting the pace for all forms of automotive in terms of design and construction.
And Peter, this event is very tightly scrutineered, and you demand that the machines be absolutely as standard. Have you had much trouble in the week of testing and of scrutineering?
No, happily, most of the competitors are following in the spirit of things and leaving things pretty well untouched.
Thank you, Peter, and now back to Bob Vincent.
Well, now we'll have a look at the top 10 qualifiers, running through them quickly on the grid. In pole position, the Roger Hayes, Dennis Neal team on the CB 1100R. Second position, Malcolm Campbell and Rod Cox, a time of 56.38 today. They're on the GSX 1100. Another Honda in third position on the grid, Andrew Johnson and Wayne Gardner. Then follows the team that won it last year, the Suzuki team, ridden by Alan Hales, his co-rider Dave Hiscock on the GSX 1100. Robert Reid and Peter Byers, I beg your pardon, on the CB 1100 next. Michael Cole and Alan Decker, two very fast riders next to them on the CB 1100. Neil Shivers and John Pace, the GSX 1100 Suzuki, the probably of the second fastest of the Suzuki contestants for tomorrow's race. Then Ron Haslam and Ken Blake, a team that you can look forward to for some very smooth riding on one side and some very topsy-turvy riding from the Englishmen on the other. David Woolley and Rod Gray on the CB 1100 in 9th fastest position, and then Lin Utley and Steve Gul on the XS 1100 Yamaha. Lin Utley riding in his 11th Castrol 6 Hour tomorrow here at Amaroo Park. ABC Sports